My name is Father Eric Andrews. I am the pastor here at the Church of St. Paul the Apostle in New York City. We're so blessed at St. Paul's that we have these musical settings for the Passions over the last couple of years. And this year we will have a new setting of the Gospel of Mark. The four Gospels were written for four different communities of faith, directed in different ways with different emphases.
Each of them helps us get a fuller sense of what exactly it is that was happening in this very, very sacred time in the life of Jesus and in the life of this early community that would become the Christian community. We have to go back and walk through what happened at the very end of Jesus' life because we're celebrating the great sacrifice of Jesus. You know, if we took any one of the Passions, we could read it, listen to it, sing it, and we would have a pretty good sense of the major events that happened during Jesus' arrest and trial and execution. But when we hold all of them together, the Passions draw out different dimensions and help us appreciate with a fuller sense of what was going on. And it really adds to our understanding and also our invitation into the mystery of this sacred time.
Mark being the first gospel written, is the most stoic and most stark. Mark's gospel in particular is Jesus at his most human. Jesus is not getting a lot of feedback from the divine. The ultimate of that is when on the cross he says, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" Here we have a Jesus who's very human, who has to lean back on his experiences of God the Father during his public ministry because there's nothing. He's getting no response to all of this, and so he has to trust in a deep way.
Mark's gospel is filled with these stories that kind of happen in like rapid succession. When we get to the Passion in the Gospel of Mark, we have this sense that time starts to slow down. There's this constant reminder of time. We've been building to this climactic moment.
When it's sung, and like it's done here, automatically it kind of opens up the whole experience.
The difference of having a through composed Passion, meaning from start to finish it is music, is that the music and the melodic line of the text really follows and supports the intention of what we're singing.
It was the setting of the Passions specifically that brought Western classical music to the rhetorical sense that we now know it in around the 1600s. That is when music started to take on that extra level of meaning, and where like a certain melody going in a certain direction can convey an emotion that the text can't convey.
For many of these gospel passages, and certainly the Passion, we may be used to hearing it year over year, and when it's set to music, set to song, we can hear it in a fresh way. We can notice things that we didn't notice before.
It is the Passion narrative, and passion best expressed in a lot of ways through music.
It draws me more deeply into the experience of prayer, for one. When I'm at Mass or any kind of liturgy, music enhances my experience of what's happening and honestly helps me appreciate more deeply the emotions that are connected to our faith.
So music just gives the listener that perfect entrance to the emotion of the story of the Passion. From the first chord, from the first scale that's played to sort of set the tone, the listener knows what to expect and knows what to feel.
From the moment we hit the first chord, I want them to feel engaged, touched, connected. I want them to feel that they heard a familiar story in a completely different way.
When there is music and liturgy, it brings out something in us that engages a different part of our very selves.
I think about this quote a lot. I think it's from St. Augustine. He said, "Those who sing pray twice." And I think like what he was like hooked into is when you're singing, and I think this is true for art in general, you're connecting to something outside of yourself. Like the inspiration comes to you. Like the name of our choir now is the In Spirit Choir, or the In Spirit Ensemble. And that word evokes this idea and this experience of spirit coming down upon us and creating music, creating art within us that we then, it's like we're a channel for the art, and then it goes back out to the people.
We're blessed that we can experience the gospel of the crucifixion narratives that come at Good Friday and Palm Sunday in this fashion.
And through the music, really able to go on the emotional journey with us from the beginning to the end of the Passion, and to feel the depth and the weight and the intensity and the importance of that story.
So I think we are adding a voice, perspective, new way of hearing the Gospels, and I think every generation and every age is unpacking this timeless story in a way that can be made accessible to the listener.
And then to hear it too with a contemporary composition. Like, this is music that we're used to hearing like right down the street at a Broadway theater. So it makes the story feel like it's a contemporary story.
My role this year for the Passion is I get to play producer, which is a favorite role of mine. I love to do it. It's the ability to bring so many talented people, put them in the right spot, and let them create the magic. We've got Jay, who's an incredible composer and has a talent like none other to take biblical text, scripture, and set it to song where it's comprehensible and it makes sense and it resonates.
In the theater, we always say like, hey, when you are so filled with emotion, you can't speak something, then you sing it. And that's what comes to mind with Jay's work. It puts the listener right into the emotion.
There's something so unique about his music that he just knows how to get an emotion out of you. And obviously the hope of church is to touch people's hearts. And I just think that he does that so beautifully.
I think it's a unique situation that we have to have a composer who is so talented, writes for musical theater, but also has a very deep understanding of liturgy and scripture, and is able to take the storytelling techniques of writing a musical and implement them in a reverent, poignant way to tell like this incredible dramatic story that is a part of our faith.
The Psalms I had done every week for 3 years, which was nice, but they're so much shorter than the Passion. I'd never done it. I do have a background in musical theater. It's something I teach, it's something I do professionally, but this seemed like a different big task.
He's been writing the Psalms for us for he's finished all 3 years cycle, and they're all incredible.
Joey, I guess 2 years ago now, since this is my third, said, why don't you try setting the Passion? And I thought, why not?
I didn't have any doubt that he was going to knock it out of the park. I knew they were going to be great. I continually blown away by these compositions each year.
So the Passion seemed like a next step, and it was a great challenge and very rewarding. When I'm writing these, I really start with text. I try to not write at the piano because I tend to go to the same chords. I start with the rhythm of the text, but I'll just do the rhythm of the text and I'll be like, oh, I think this is how the rhythm goes, or the heartbeat of the song goes. But rhythm for sure is the biggest challenge because it's not a lyric. It's not crafted to be a lyric. So to find a beat, a heartbeat that works for a whole chapter or even sequence is the challenge.
When Jay writes these Passions, he's not allowed to change the text at all. He can't add in a chorus, he can't add a repeat, or let's do this refrain again. This is the text, and what you'd like to change around a few words to make this melodic line smooth, too bad. You gotta write for those words, and he has that unique ability to make scripture sound beautiful.
Luke was my first one, so I used a bit of restraint in that, I would say, compositionally. So I used kind of the Peter and the Wolf treatment. Jesus was represented by a trinity of strings, so I wanted the strings to be representative of whatever he was speaking. The disciples or other people were speaking. I used 2 clarinets because I really wanted a wind instrument, because that takes human breath to work and play those instruments. And we had actually found a harpsichord somewhere in the church somewhere, Joey found. And so we're like, oh, why don't we use that? And so that kind of was Pilate's music. But I really stuck to the rules. And I feel like I wrote Luke pretty sequentially from beginning to end, just taking each section saying, okay, here's my puzzle piece that I've they said I was going to do, and then just kind of said it as going on. Matthew, the text is just a lot more theatrical, right? This is what the Godspell, the musical, was based on, the Gospel of Matthew. I took the theatricality of his language. I really went more toward opera, leitmotif, themes, and so it read a little bit more like a little operetta in a way. There's like prophecies and dreams and extra characters. So you felt the theatricality of it all. And so I leaned toward that, taking a little bit more risk as to what a passion could be for the modern ear, knowing that I had done the first one before. And Mark was the most sparse, text-wise. So what's interesting about Mark specifically is that it was the shortest of the Gospels, so they say. It didn't feel much shorter than the other ones. It was about 200 words shorter than Matthew when I did the word count, but it's not a lot of detail. So what the interesting challenge for me was to give the text that we're supposed to say, because this is the gospel, but also to give the subtext and to give the feeling of the music underneath, so that we have a full experience of what's happening. There's a couple of paragraphs at the end, right after the crucifixion, where he mentions the women. There were also women there who ministered to him, and because it's so sparse otherwise, it's interesting that he took the time to say, listen, there were women there. It also starts with the anointing at Bethany and ends with the women watching the tomb. So there's a very clear, to me, point of view about these women who are watching. And so that was my first in, knowing that, the people who were actually closest to Jesus during this time were possibly these women.
The real believers in Mark's gospel are the women. The women are the ones who carry the faith through the passion narrative of Mark. The men all go running. They betray him, they deny him, they run for shelter.
And because they had distance from what was going on, they had maybe the facts, but also the emotional distance to be able to have perspective on it. So I thought, well, that's interesting. What if the women were the one kind of telling the story? So it's something I've always wanted to do with the Passions, because we have such amazing, women singers. All of them are amazing, of course, but this felt natural and authentic to the story, and actually intrinsic to Mark's story.
Why was it so important for Mark to talk about women at the beginning and then mention women again at the end? I think none of the other gospels have mentioned, especially these women at the end, just being like, there were women there witnessing it, being part of it, just staying when all the other men were freaking out about the consequences of what was going on. The women stayed.
And he took that and he blew it out, and we have this whole song. The way he wrote it, it's just so powerful, and it like makes me as a woman feel seen.
And their fidelity, their faithfulness in staying with Jesus to the end, it is the model for who we want to be as disciples as well.
When we say something, sometimes what we're feeling goes right with what we're saying, and sometimes what we're feeling inside is actually maybe bubbled up and we're not really saying what we feel. Music has the power to evoke both of those things, so that we can see the dichotomy and feel kind of the strain that's happening versus what's being said. That's kind of the cool thing that can happen with setting an entire passion. And so really having to fill in the feeling of it all was the big challenge with Mark. I'm working with the amazing Adam Jones, who is the orchestrator on this project and a lot of the projects here at St. Paul. He takes what I write for the piano and the voice and adds instruments. So I kind of liken it to me giving him a drawing that's all finished, but it's in black and white, or the outlines are there for him to fill in the colors.
Jay is such a really knowledgeable composer that when I get anything from him, most of it is there. So I get a piano part and I get all the vocal parts. He does all the vocal arranging himself. So when I get it, it is set for every character that is going to sing a part, which there are a lot. There are a lot of moving parts vocally. And the piano part is very thought out and very specific and informative. I get to take that and try to add the orchestra on top of that.
It's also has a challenge in that it is my third one, so I didn't want to use things I used in the first one, and I didn't want to use things I used in the second one, so I kind of started from that place. So it took me a long time to figure out what I wanted to do with Mark. But once I figured it out, it went very quickly. So this year is the year of the Rhapsody at Carnegie Hall. It's the 100th year anniversary of Rhapsody in Blue. And so a rhapsody, in terms of its form, it just means there's not really a form. You can go from moment to moment, chapter to chapter, and whatever feelings are coming out is just what's happening. You're not beholden to like the puzzle piece that I said I was going to do in Luke, or the motifs that I used in Matthew. So I allowed myself the freedom to really just go whatever the feeling was in each chapter that Mark was writing, and went really rhythmic. The rhythm is really important, I think, in this year's Passion, because I feel as a composer that the rhythm is the heartbeat of whatever the storyteller is feeling at that moment.
Jay finds a great way to comprehend the text, set it to music, and then find like a style or a genre where it can live.
What will be very apparent very quickly is the unique instrumentation that we're using for this. Not to spoil it, but it's not going to sound like your standard chamber orchestra behind the piece. It is going to sound somewhat Middle Eastern and somewhat folky. And I know Jay is also using Filipino influence. We tried to also own that in the instrumentation. And we have a pretty eclectic instrumentation on this. So we have piano, guitar, accordion, and then we have a couple strings and a reed player and some percussion. So it's going to be a very unique, eclectic approach. It's kind of terrifying and exciting on this project.
One of Jay's directions that he has on the music is nightmare bluegrass. He's like, this is a nightmare bluegrass moment, or bluegrass nightmare. I think that's how he wrote it. And I'm just like, I've never ever sung anything that had that direction. I love it.
And my job is to give the instrumentalists the best thing that they could play to complement and to help realize Jay's overall vision. Jay is so prolific of a composer, and he hits all of those styles so well. The Filipino hymns that he is referencing at certain points, such a beautiful sound that I got so excited to try to recreate that myself.
Luke, like I said, I think I was just overwhelmed, so it was let's start from the beginning. Matthew, for some reason, and I remember this clearly, just the name Barabbas stuck out to me, and I just immediately thought Barabbas, and the whole thing kind of just revolved around Barabbas.
This is my second year working on Jay's Passion, and the way that he crafts the crowd scene, releasing Barabbas, and the chaos that he is able to create, but also still understanding the text. The way Jay writes those is so precise. And it's been my favorite. This is my second time just trying to heighten that energy even more. What are the instruments going to do behind that to also convey that urgency and the chaos?
That Mark I had printed out a long time ago. The first thing I wrote was actually the crucifixion sequence for Mark. And I was thinking, who's the woman who is telling this story, as opposed to Jesus singing about it, or a narrator singing about it, or the disciples, whatever. And I thought, even though she was not named specifically in Mark, what if this was Mary, who was there singing about watching her son go through this. Again, trying to get to the heart of the matter in this Passion in terms of the feeling, what's the most kind of emotional way I can get into this. And so the crucifixion I wrote as basically an aria for Mary. I wrote it backwards from there. I kind of finished it and then I went, okay, how do I get into that? How do I get into that? So it kind of all revolved around this idea of Mary telling us. And that's the only time she appears in the way I said it. So that was my in for Mark. I've named all the ensemble, instead of saying men and women or tenors and basses, I named them all witnesses. So I felt like my verb for Mark's Passion was to witness. What does it mean to witness? We see things all the time, especially in New York. How involved am I when I see something happening? How detached am I? Why did I make that choice? What was I feeling? What were they feeling?
Each track is called a witness, witness one, witness two. And the intention of our tracks and what we're singing, yes, we are narrating, but also we're narrating in a way that's I saw this thing happen and I need to tell somebody about this happened afterward. I need to tell, the other people that were there, the people that weren't there, the people who were asking what happened, how could this have gone down this way? So that's the role of a witness, not just narrating, here are the facts.
What I'm trying to evoke in this Passion is how how are you as a listener witnessing this story? How are these women witnessing this story? How are the men? And what those feelings were, and trying to musicalize that in some kind of sense. I think there's a feeling in this passion of hope that I want people to come away with, because it's hard. It just ends and we don't really know what happens yet. We all know what eventually happens. But I think, again, there's a confidence in these women who are watching that it wasn't necessarily all doom and gloom. Like, they're with him the whole time. They're like, she's ministering to him in the beginning and they're with him at the end. And because we know how it ends, I think there is a sense of hope that not everyone had, but certain people had. And I want people to feel what it was like to maybe have had that. The composer, Steve Warner, was here for a concert a couple weeks ago and saying, when he writes something, as soon as he finishes it, it's no longer his, and it's God's, and it's ours. And I feel it's the very same way. It's really not about like my composition. It is just about trying to tell the story and like have you listen and hopefully engage with it.
St. Paul's in New York City is such a specific sound. It is a specific group of people. Joey Chansey, music director, and his vision, and currently Father Eric. I was there when Father Gil was there. The vision and the group of people there is so specific that I feel like we're telling a one-of-a-kind, unique version of the Passion that so fits the congregation and just the city in general. It represents something so much bigger to me in such a small moment, but also so big.
Well, really, when we're hearing, praying, singing the Passion, we're honoring the very center of the life of our faith. The rich history of our faith says that, the evangelists, those who wrote down these stories, that shared these stories, and everyone who supported them, every one of these individuals was a part of the narrative. And so we are all invited, wherever we are in our journey, to be a part of that as well.
It feels like an honor to be a part of helping tell a story. It feels like an important role that we have to do it right and to do it well.
The ministry here in general and the community here is amazing. And the music is one of the things that attracted me when I first, just popped into the church, 13 years ago or however long that was. It was just a vibrant community.
All the people that come and attend, the Palm Sunday Masses, they leave not just being touched by the music and how incredible it is, and the singers and the orchestrations, but that the singers and the music and the orchestrations help them to understand, connect, and experience that story in such a deeper way.
I'm very lucky to get to do this with the musicians and the singers that we get to do this at St. Paul's. I feel so connected with St. Paul's, and I work with them in so many different guises at this point. There are oftentimes without St. Paul's, I don't know how I would have maintained my life as I know it. Very, very thankful and very happy to be able to get back in this sense.
I've been here this is year 3 for me. The minute I started singing with the group, everyone was like, you're in. You're part of the family now. Like it's just an amazing community of people, and I feel very lucky to be in the family.
We're in a great tradition. We're adding our spin, if you will, but we're adding our stamp. Hopefully these works are going to be timeless and used by other congregations. We are blessed not only with having Jay as a great composer, but also Joey Chansey, who can orchestrate this along with other talented arrangers. And then we have an amazing set of folks who can proclaim this and sing it and vocalize.
I just am so grateful to be in a community where we gather and we celebrate these sacred texts, which are brought to us in new ways. We might say ways that bring the best of our current musical gifts, genres, expertise. There is a special way that by bringing a modern interpretation in terms of that music to these words, that we are surely inviting people into a deeper experience.